Sarah Wood, founder and chief communication consultant at Sarah Wood Communication, talks to host Doug Simon on PR's Top Pros Talk.
Sarah, since you focus on how an organization can communicate through its own channels, can you share sort of your most important tip about what they should be thinking of when they're utilizing those channels to generate an effective outcome?
I would say repurpose. I think repurpose, right? You go to all the effort to identify great content, to craft a good story, to figure out, the best ways
Mhm.
to reach and resonate with your audience. And don't just let that be a one and done situation. Think about ways that you can alter it a little bit and you can use it in a different format, in a different way, because you don't want great content to go to waste.
Yeah, and you talk about altering it, which I think is an interesting point. Is it a challenge if you're trying to use identical content across different platforms?
I would say yes. I mean, in some situations it might be warranted, but typically the different platforms, you're hitting a slightly different audience, and also the expectations for that platform are different. If you are hosting something on your own website, of course, it can be a little bit more long form, right? You can host your longer videos on YouTube. But if you're marketing it for a social media platform, you're going to want to cut that text way down. You're going to want to make sure you're looking at the time limitations for both what works best for that platform and what the requirements for that platform are. So I think also it just gives you more leeway, right? If you do have an audience that is the same across platforms, they may not want to see the exact same thing,
Right.
over and over again. But if you alter it a little bit, if you kind of tweak it, then it's like a brand new thing, even though you are using significantly less resources to create that than you would if you were going back and starting over. If you're going through the whole brainstorming and identification and creation and releases, if you have other people featured in it. So I'm all about repurposing content, and trying to make it evergreen in some way, or trying to make it continue appealing to your audience.
Yeah, do you find this an overlap? Say, obviously, organizations that are maybe going to your website to get information, individuals who are doing that, those who are receiving your emails as well, those who may be following your social or linked channels. Do they tend to be a lot of different people, or is there a lot of overlap from what you've seen?
It really depends on your audience and where they are. But I wouldn't necessarily, like, say, just taking me as a personal example, I wouldn't necessarily sign up for a newsletter and follow them on Facebook and on X and on LinkedIn and on Instagram and listen to their podcast and go to their website regularly. I'd probably pick one or two of those if it's an organization that I'm really invested in following. I'm not likely to pick all the locations that you might possibly see them in. So you might have some overlap, but it's not going to be the same people every single time.
Got it. So it does make sense to share the information that you're trying to share, perhaps in a different form or format, so it's a fit.
Even if it was the exact same audience, that it's important to continue sharing the information. The old adage, right, was you had to see something 3 times before you would take action on it. I was on a webinar the other day, and the speaker said, you now have to reach someone 25 times before they're willing to take action. Now, they didn't cite their source, so I don't know if that was research based or not, but it sounds like it could be true. To the ear test, it sounds like that could be accurate. Because we're just so inundated with information these days. There are so many channels, there's so many ways to get information. And I think you really do have to reach people more often. It's hard to over communicate with someone to the extent that they're going to kind of write you off and
Right.
just, nope out of the situation.
Do you have tips for building strong relationships with the audience based on the content that an organization is putting out there? Because that seems it can be sort of a one-sided conversation.
I have 3 main tips. One is be true to who you are. Consistency is key. Your message, your voice, that should all align with what your actions, your mission, your values, what your organization stands for. It needs to be consistent across time and across platforms. because you have to be a believable voice and you want to be consistent with that, right? Two is know who your audience is and pay attention to what they're most interested in, whether that's the content that they're most interested in, whether it's how they like to be communicated with. Your audience is going to change over time, whether that's because new people are coming in, whether that's because your audience is getting older and maybe your demographics are changing. And so you want to keep checking in. Are you actually reaching the people that you think you're reaching? Is that who we want to be reaching? Is it having the effect that we want? You always want to be kind of testing the waters, right? And seeing what's working well, what's not. Should we be looking to change something? Should we maintain this? Where should we be putting our resources? And three is ties back into what I just said, communicate far more than you think they're actually going to be interested in. And you say, why do you say that, Sarah? Well, you don't want people to be bored with me. And I was like, okay, because when you're embedded in the organization, when you work there, you're surrounded by the good work that you do in that organization. You see what's happening day in and day out. You see every message, you know the backstory, you've heard about it. You're probably bored about talking about it or hearing about it and all of that. But that is not true of your audience. And you have to communicate with them consistently or they're not going to know what's going on. They're going to forget it. They're not going to hear it. It's going to get drowned in the feed. They might have missed that email. It's like me coming back from winter break. My kid was out on winter break, so I took a few days off, and I was like, I had like 4,000 emails or something, right? And it's like, a lot of these I normally would have read, right? And I'm normally interested in, but because of just the volume and when it comes back,
Right.
I was just like, well, we're just going to mass delete these, and I'm not going to worry about it, and then start clean.
Some of the things you're talking about, it seems like they can be managed on a relatively limited budget. Obviously, you'll need some resources, whether it's inside your organization or some support with someone outside. But it's not like you're spending a lot to make what can be a significant difference.
You're not. And I'll say to people, and we know that this is the case, we know that when there's a change in an administration, a lot of people will get a little uncertain about the economy. And one of the things they'll look at is, should we cut that communication, marketing, public relations budget? And I'm here to say, no, please don't do that. But you can do it in a economical manner. And one of the ways that we focus on doing that is using the communication channels that you own, right? So what do I mean by that? I mean, your website, your email list, your social media accounts, you control what goes on to them. You control when it goes on there. And there's really no additional cost to publish content or have conversations there outside of your basic setup costs and your staff time, right? There's not a lot of additional add-ons, or, you're not paying by email sent, right? You're paying, for your overall hosting costs, but you're not paying for each additional message. So you have the ability to kind of build those foundational relationships with your audiences by keeping up the communication cadence there. And then when you do have major news, when you do have something that you want to tap into for media relations and public relations, they're going to be more receptive to that because you've already created this foundation that they're interested and invested in what you have to say.
With this conversation, you've really created a strong foundation for everyone who's watching. Thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I hope so. I hope that was helpful.
Definitely sure it is.